My father gave me an ultimatum. Attend my perfect sister's wedding or lose my tuition. He thought I was a failure until I showed up with a secret that changed everything. When Madison's father threatened to cut her tuition unless she attended her sister's wedding during finals week. He had no idea she'd been hiding a secret that would shatter every assumption he'd ever made about his underachieving daughter. Madison stood on the steps outside the computer science building. Spring sunshine, warming the campus around her. When her father's call shattered the peaceful afternoon. His voice carried the familiar weight of absolute authority, the tone of a man accustomed to compliance. Attend your sister's wedding, Madison, or your tuition ends. The words were flat. Cold. Final. No negotiation. No consideration of circumstances. Madison gripped the railing. Her mind racing. Dad. It's finals week. She managed. Her voice barely steady. No excuses. He replied with the impatience of someone whose time was being wasted. Heather's wedding is May 15th. You will arrive 3 days early. This is non-negotiable. That's the same week as my final project presentation. Madison protested. Desperation creeping into her voice. My graduation is the day after the wedding. Stop making this about you. He cut her off sharply. This is about family. If you don't show up, don't expect another cent. You think your little science projects matter more than real life. This is real life. Grow up. The line went dead. Madison stared at her phone's dark screen. Stomach churning with a familiar mixture of frustration and hurt. How many times had her father dismissed years of rigorous work as little science projects? The countless sleepless nights coding. The hard-won grades. The exhausting balance of multiple demanding courses, all reduced to a patronizing phrase that revealed how little he understood or valued her efforts. But Richard Hayes had made a critical miscalculation. He thought he was leveraging his financial support to control his daughter's choices. What he didn't know was that Madison had been living a double life for years, and she no longer needed his money or his approval. Growing up as Heather Hayes' sister meant living perpetually in shadow. Heather possessed effortless charm, big blue eyes. Perfect blonde curls. The kind of natural charisma that commanded attention in any room. She was the daughter their parents showcased. The one whose achievements were celebrated. Whose dreams were funded without hesitation. Madison was the quiet, awkward afterthought. The daughter whose struggles with reading and mathematics in high school were interpreted not as challenges to overcome but as confirmation of fundamental limitations. Not everyone can be a star like your sister. Richard had told Madison during her sophomore year of high school, not cruelly, but matter-of-factly. As though he were simply stating an obvious truth. Some people just have to work harder for less. He wasn't trying to motivate her. He was setting her ceiling. The turning point came when a perceptive English teacher suggested Madison be tested for learning differences. The diagnosis was dyslexia finally. A name for the battle she'd been fighting alone for years. For the first time, Madison understood that her struggles weren't evidence of inadequacy but symptoms of a specific, manageable condition. Her father barely glanced at the evaluation report. So you have a label? He said dismissively. The reality doesn't change. Not everyone is built for academics. Her mother offered only platitudes. We'll adjust our expectations, dear. But they didn't adjust anything meaningful. They simply gave up on her. Something hardened in Madison then. A quiet determination took root. Let them underestimate me. I will build a life so substantial, so brilliant, that their version of me will crumble on contact. When Madison enrolled in college, her father insisted she pursue education, something practical to fall back on. He called it the subtext clear a safe career for someone with limited potential. The first semester as an education major nearly broke her. The coursework felt disconnected from anything that engaged her mind. Then, fulfilling an elective requirement, she enrolled in Introduction to Computer Science. In that fluorescent-lit computer lab, something fundamental shifted. Code felt like a language her brain was designed to speak. The logic, the order, the way persistence and problem-solving yielded tangible results. It resonated with her in ways traditional academics never had. After her first significant project, Professor Miranda Thompson, a legend in the computer science department, stopped Madison after class. Your solution was elegant, Professor Thompson said, studying Madison with the keen assessment of someone who recognized untapped potential. You approach problems differently, which is valuable. Have you considered majoring in CS? Madison gripped her backpack straps. Certain she'd misheard. My parents already think I'm barely surviving as an education major. Professor Thompson smiled knowingly. Sometimes, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. The next morning, Madison officially switched her major to computer science. She told no one in her family. Thus began her double life. During phone calls home, she spoke vaguely of lesson plans and student teaching practicum. Meanwhile, she was immersed in a completely different world: algorithms, data structures, software engineering, artificial intelligence. She worked late nights in the library, cried in the shower from exhaustion, then dragged herself to Ada M. Lecture. She made the dean's list every single semester. No one at home knew. Senior year brought recognition that transcended the academic environment. Professor Thompson invited Madison to join her research team. Together, they developed a sophisticated distribution model for emergency response, resource allocation, innovative work that caught the attention of leaders in the field. This is genuinely new, Professor Thompson said, her eyes bright with excitement. We need to submit this to the National Computing Conference. The paper was accepted. Madison's parents never noticed. But recruiter did. By early spring of her senior year, 5 job offers filled her inbox from prestigious technology companies. She accepted a position with Meridian Tech, a cutting-edge firm known for attracting top talent and offering exceptional compensation and growth opportunities. Then came the email from the dean. Madison had been selected as valedictorian, the highest academic honor in her graduating class. She sat motionless in the library, the screen's glow washing over her tear-streaked face. The top student in her entire class, and the people who claimed to love her, didn't even know what she was studying. Madison methodically compiled evidence of her achievements into a manila folder, Dean's List certificates from every semester, research awards, the published conference paper, letters of recommendation, and the official job offer from Meridian Tech with its $90,000 starting salary. When her father called and asked casually, "You passing your classes at least?" Madison smiled softly and replied, "Yes, Dad. I'm passing." The months leading to Heather's wedding brought a cascade of subtle degradations that reinforced Madison's place in the family hierarchy. At Heather's engagement party, her fiancé, Jason, asked Madison if she was a friend from work, not recognizing her as the sister. Despite Madison attending multiple family events with him, present at the bridesmaid dress fitting, Heather commented loudly, within earshot of other bridesmaids, "We'll need to take Madison's and more at the bust. Everyone else fills it out better." Later, Heather informed Madison she'd be positioned in the back row for wedding photos. "It's an aesthetic thing," she explained with casual cruelty. For balance. As if Madison's very existence tilted her sister's perfect symmetry. The final revelation came the morning Madison was preparing to leave for the wedding festivities. While searching her mother's purse for spare car keys, a receipt slipped out: payment for the wedding venue. 50美元. 000. A gift from their parents to Heather and Jason. Madison stared at the number, her breath catching. Just months earlier, she had asked her father for help with textbook costs, a few $100s to ease the burden of her final semester. He'd sent Stowe, claiming they were stretched financially thin. $100 for her education, $50,000 for Heather's party. The disparity was so stark it was almost laughable. Almost. The silence was over. It was time for the truth. The sky on graduation morning was bright and cloudless, beautiful weather for what should have been a family celebration. Madison had reserved seats for her parents and sister in the section designated for families of honor graduates. As the ceremony began, those seats remained conspicuously empty. Madison felt the familiar ache, not surprise, but the dull throb of confirmed expectations. She adjusted her cap, breathed through the pain she'd learned to carry, and walked to the podium when her name was called as valedictorian. 4 years ago, I came to this university, believing I had limited potential, she began, her voice clear and steady, carrying across the assembled graduates and their families. Not because it was true, but because it was a story I had been told repeatedly by people whose opinions I valued. She paused, letting the words settle. Today, I stand here as your valedictorian, the highest academic honor this institution can bestow. This diploma represents more than accumulated credits or a GPA. It represents the courage to define ourselves rather than accepting others' definitions of who we should be. Her voice strengthened. Your worth is not decided by who doubts you. It's decided by who you choose to become. Through effort and persistence and refusing to accept limitations, others try to impose. The applause broke like a wave sustained. Genuine. From fellow students who understood the subtext, even if they didn't know her specific story. Afterward, Madison ducked into a bathroom. Traded her cap and gown for a tailored blue dress she'd chosen specifically for this moment. Tucked her diploma beside the manila folder in her bag. And drove to the country club, where Heather's wedding was already underway. Madison stepped out of her car. Heels clicking purposefully on the stone walkway. Her parents stood near Heather, who was radiant in her elaborate wedding gown. Surrounded by bridesmaids and photographers capturing pre-ceremony moments. Richard's smile evaporated when he saw his daughter. "You're late," he hissed. "And where's your bridesmaid dress? I need to speak with you," Madison said evenly. "Privately." "This isn't the time. Madison. The photographer is waiting. Go change immediately." "Richard." Her mother interjected carefully, sensing something significant in Madison's demeanor. "Let's just hear what she has to say." Heather spun around. Her veil rustling dramatically. "You're disrupting everything. This is my day. Then I'll make this quick." Madison replied calmly. They moved into a small, sunlit library off the main hall, a quiet space away from the wedding preparations. Madison set her diploma on the polished mahogany table, like laying down a trump card. "I graduated today," she said simply. "Valedictorian of the computer science department." Stunned silence filled the room. Richard blinked repeatedly, processing words that made no sense within his understanding of his daughter. "Computer science. You're an education major." Madison opened her manila folder and spread the pages across the table with deliberate precision, the transcript showing a perfect 4.0 gigapascals. Research certificates. The published conference paper. Multiple award letters. And the official offer from Meridian Tech. "I switched my major sophomore year," she explained. Her voice steady. "I maintained a perfect GPA for 6 consecutive semesters. I have a full scholarship offer to Stanford for my master's degree. My starting salary at Meridian Tech is $90,000. The color drained from her father's face, then returned in a flush of confused anger. "You lied to us," he said, his voice rising. "For years. I stopped volunteering information." Madison corrected him calmly. "Because you never asked questions. When was the last time you expressed genuine curiosity about what I was studying? What I cared about? What challenges I was facing?" Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. "But why wouldn't you tell us you were doing so well?" "Because it never mattered before," Madison said, the words carrying years of accumulated hurt. "Because every conversation inevitably turned back to Heather. Because Dad made it abundantly clear I wasn't worth believing in." She paused, then addressed her mother directly. "You told Heather I was on academic probation last year, didn't you?" The guilty expressions on both parents' faces confirmed what Madison had suspected. "Why would you say that?" her mother asked weakly. "We were protecting you." Richard straightened defensively, falling back on familiar justifications. "Lowering expectations, so you wouldn't feel pressured." "I didn't need you to lower expectations," Madison said, her voice shaking not with fear, but with the force of finally speaking truth. "I needed your respect. I needed you to believe I was capable of more than you assumed. And you chose today, of all days, to stage this performance." Richard snapped, anger replacing confusion. "How incredibly selfish." "No," Madison said, meeting his eyes without flinching. "You gave me an ultimatum: attend this wedding or lose tuition funding. But here's the thing. That I don't need your tuition. Not now. Not ever again. I've been financially independent since I accepted the Meridian offer 6 months ago." Heather's voice cut through, high and brittle. "You are ruining everything." Jason, our fiancé, stepped forward, his eyes scanning the documents spread across the table. He picked up the research paper, studying it carefully. "You wrote this?" he asked, a new note of respect entering his voice. Madison nodded. "I saw this model presented at a conference in Boston last year," Jason said slowly, looking from the paper to Madison with dawning realization. It was genuinely brilliant. The implications for disaster response logistics were significant. He turned to his future in-laws, his expression confused and somewhat disappointed. And your first response was to scold her for lying rather than acknowledging this accomplishment. The air went very still. Madison gathered her documents methodically. I will sit as a guest at this wedding. Not as a bridesmaid. She announced. I will celebrate your marriage. Heather. Because that's genuinely worth celebrating. But I will not pretend to be less than I am. Not anymore. Then she turned and walked out. Her heels firm and steady on the hardwood floor. Leaving her family to process revelations that contradicted everything they thought they knew about her. The wedding ceremony was indeed beautiful. Madison sat in the back row. Her blue dress. A quiet statement of independence. Her diploma in her lap, like a shield and trophy combined. During the reception, word of Madison's accomplishment spread through the guests like ripples across water. Surprise transformed into genuine respect. Conversations bloomed around her that had never happened at previous family gatherings, people asking about her research. Her job. Her plans. Treating her as someone with valuable expertise rather than the family's disappointing daughter. Her Aunt Patricia, who had been a quiet ally for years, navigated through the crowd and lifted her champagne flute in a private toast. To Madison, she said softly. Meant only for her niece's ears. Who had the courage to be herself, even when no one was watching. Later, Madison's mother found her on the terrace. Away from the celebration's noise. I failed you, she said. Her voice thick with genuine regret. I saw the difference in how we treated you compared to Heather. I didn't fight it. I chose what was easier. I am so sorry. Thank you for saying that. Madison replied. Her tone neither harsh nor immediately forgiving. But rebuilding trust will take time. Apologies are a beginning, not an ending. When the evening wound down, Madison stood under the stars and felt something she had never experienced at a family event. Peace. Not the peace of being accepted, but the deeper peace of no longer needing acceptance to know her own worth. Her father found her as she was preparing to leave. He stood in silence for a long moment. And Madison waited without filling the uncomfortable space. Perhaps I underestimated you, he finally said. It wasn't the apology Madison deserved. It fell far short of acknowledgement of years of dismissiveness and unequal treatment. But it was a crack in the fortress, a small admission that his perception had been wrong. Madison didn't need his approval anymore. She had built a life on her own terms. Proven her capabilities through sustained effort. And earned recognition from people whose judgment was based on merit rather than biased assumptions. But in that small, grudging admission, she heard something significant. The sound of a relationship, potentially beginning anew. Built not on his terms and expectations, but on reality and mutual respect. Madison Hayes' story illuminates several critical insights about family dynamics. Achievement. And self-worth. Differential treatment damages even when unintentional. Richard and his wife genuinely believed they were protecting Madison by lowering expectations. Instead, they communicated that she wasn't worth investing in. Creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, they then blamed on her limitations rather than their lack of support. Hidden achievements are protection mechanisms. Madison didn't conceal her success from malice or deception. She did it for self-preservation. When your accomplishments are consistently dismissed or overshadowed, sometimes, the healthiest response is to stop offering them for judgment. Financial leverage reveals true priorities. The $50,000 wedding gift compared to the $100 textbook contribution wasn't just a financial disparity, it was a clear statement of whose dreams and needs the parents valued. External validation matters when internal support fails. Professor Thompson's recognition. The research team invitation. The valedictorian honor. And the job offers provided Madison with objective confirmation of her abilities. When subjective family assessment was consistently negative, ultimatums can backfire spectacularly. Richard's attempt to leverage tuition funding to control Madison's behavior only worked if she actually needed that funding. His assumption that she remained dependent revealed how little he understood about her actual circumstances. Coming out academically requires courage. Madison's decision to reveal her achievements wasn't about vindication or revenge. It was about finally refusing to participate in a family narrative that diminished her. Today, Madison works at Meridian Tech, where her innovative approaches to complex problems have already earned her recognition and advancement opportunities. She's pursuing her master's degree at Stanford while working remotely, building expertise that will position her as a leader in her field. Her relationship with her family remains complicated. Her mother has made genuine efforts toward understanding and reconciliation. Her father's journey toward recognizing his biases and changing his behavior continues more slowly. Heather's relationship with Madison has evolved as well. Freed from the burden of being the successful sister against whom Madison was constantly compared unfavorably, Heather has begun to see her sister as a person rather than a reflection on herself. The siblings now have occasional coffee together, conversations that are careful but increasingly genuine. Building something new, rather than trying to repair what was broken. Madison Hayes' story challenges comfortable assumptions about family support and meritocracy. Her academic and professional success came not because of her family's encouragement, but despite their dismissiveness. She succeeded by refusing to internalize the limitations others tried to impose. By finding mentors who recognized her potential. And by doing the relentless, exhausting work of excellence when no one was watching or celebrating. Her decision to reveal her achievements at her sister's wedding wasn't theatrical revenge, it was necessary, boundary setting. By threatening her tuition, her father forced a confrontation that revealed just how little leverage he actually had, and how little he understood about the daughter he'd underestimated for years. The most powerful moment wasn't the revelation itself, it was Madison's calm statement, "I don't need your tuition. Not now. Not ever again." That sentence represented years of secret preparation, strategic independence building, and the culmination of countless decisions to value her own potential more than her family valued it. For young people navigating families that don't see them clearly, Madison's path offers both warning and hope. Warning that family support cannot be assumed or forced. And hope that your worth exists independent of whether the people closest to you recognize it. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is succeed quietly. Build independence carefully. And reveal your achievements only when you're strong enough that others' reactions, whether pride or resentment, can't diminish what you've built. Madison didn't need her father's grudging acknowledgement that he'd underestimated her. She already knew her value. His belated recognition was simply him catching up to a reality she'd been living for years. That's not a satisfying family reconciliation story. But it's an honest one about what happens when you refuse to be defined by others' limitations and instead define yourself through persistent, excellent work that eventually becomes undeniable. Story. 2 inches the hospital. My sister demanded I abort my baby so she could be first. The rest of the family turned on me. What happened next? Left them in silence. My name's Maya Tran. I'm 30. And my family asked me to end my pregnancy, so my sister, the golden child, could be first. 7 months isn't long on a calendar. But it can feel like a lifetime when you're counting them by negative tests and hopeful meals you're scared to eat in case hope ruins your appetite. Ethan and I had a ritual. We'd sit on the edge of the tub and wait for the minute to pass. Pretending to talk about anything else. The crooked towel bar. The weird neighbor who waters their porch until the line showed up. Or didn't. Every month we reset the clock. Every month we said, "Next one." I had a drawer full of tests and a phone note titled "Names We Won't Regret Later." And on a random Tuesday morning in late spring, the bathroom went quiet in a way that didn't feel empty anymore. We told my family that night at my mom's place because she loves gatherings. Loves dishes on warmers and people standing shoulder to shoulder in the kitchen. When I held up the little grainy printout, the room tilted in the sweet way. Good news makes things tilt. My aunt clapped. My cousins screamed. Somebody hugged me so hard, my ribs squeaked. My mom put a hand to her mouth and cried into her sleeves. It was chaos. Bright. Warm chaos. Everyone was so happy except my younger sister, Tessa. She went still like someone had pulled a plug out of the wall. Her smile, polite a second earlier, slipped off in one piece. The sound of celebration wobbled as she set down her wine glass, then lifted it again and slammed it against the countertop. It shattered like ice cracking on a lake. The whole kitchen fell silent. You could hear the fizz from a can finally opened. "You don't get it," she said. Shards glittering on the marble between us. "I'm supposed to be first. Not you." Nobody moved. Mom's fingers hovered over the mess, as if she could press the pieces back together. My aunt started to say something and swallowed it. Ethan stepped closer to me, his palm at my elbow steady. "Kiet." I should have known that glass wasn't the last thing she'd try to break. For as long as I remember, Tessa was the one the weather changed for. When she was 4 and refused to wear shoes at the park, we all went barefoot on burning paths. At 16, when she crashed Mom's Corolla into the hedge got yelled at. In college, when she called from a dorm stairwell crying about failing stats, Mom drove 6 hours with cash and groceries. It was always like that, a pattern woven so tightly through our life that we stopped seeing the thread. The pattern had numbers, real ones. In 2018, Mom loaned Tessa $5,000 from what she called the wedding envelope. The fund she'd been feeding for both of us since we were teenagers. Just to hold her over. Mom said, folding the envelope flat with her hand. You're steady. May. You'll be fine. In 2021. When Tessa broke her lease and moved home. Dad paid the $1,850 penalty, without blinking, because she needs a soft place to land. That Christmas. When I suggested we make gifts by hand to save money. Mom smiled apologetically and pressed a wrapped sweater into my hands. Later, I found out she'd bought Tessa a $1,200 camera, so she can start that photography business. I asked if there was anything left in the wedding envelope, and Mom said, not really. But we'll figure it out. You always do. There were quotes too. Like museum plaques, under old habits. Don't upset Tessa. She's sensitive. Let her have this one. Once. At my own birthday dinner, the 31st floor. City lights, like a spilled jewelry box. Tessa blew out my candles with me, and Mom said, laughing, you two will always share. When I got promoted, Tessa arrived late. Glanced at my flowers. And said, must be nice to have a job people respect. No one said anything then either. I learned to tuck the sting into quiet drawers. So when she shattered the glass that night, everyone defaulted to the script. Mom grabbed a broom, muttering apologies to the air. Dad patted Tessa's shoulder as if she'd burned her hand. We'll talk later, he told me, eyes sliding away. He has a way of nodding like that, like there's a meeting I wasn't invited to. We went home early. Ethan and I. My cheeks hot from all the smiling. At 2 a.m. I lay awake and named our baby in my head. I pictured fingers curled around mine. I traced the places we'd hang drawings no one else would understand. I believed we'd crossed a line into new territory where the old maps would stop mattering. At 8. Someone pounded on our door. 3 heavy knocks. Bang. Bang. Bang, the kind that says the person outside thinks they own part of what's inside. Ethan opened it in pajama shorts. Hair pointing in 3 directions. Tessa stood on the stoop with a stack of papers clipped together so neatly the metal glinted. She didn't say hello. Appointments, she said. And shoved the stack into Ethan's chest. He fumbled. And they scattered against him like stiff leaves. 3 of them already booked. You can pick one. My name was on the top line of all 3. The times were highlighted in yellow, 9:30 a.m. Thursday. 1:00 p.m. Friday. 4:15 p.m. Monday. She'd circled the clinic address and scribbled. Front desk will expect you. The ink bled where she'd pressed too hard. Ethan looked from the papers to her. Slow. As if not understanding might change what was happening. Tessa, he said. Voice rough with sleep. No. She sniffed. Made a face like the smell in our hallway offended her. You should be thanking me. It takes weeks to get in. He tore the papers in half. Then in quarters. Not elegant. Not dramatic. Just hands doing what hearts can't phrase. White confetti drifted onto our doormat. Gentle as snow. Tessa's mouth twisted. You're making a mistake. She hissed at me. You don't even know what being a mother means. I wanted to say 1,000 things. I wanted to ask when my life started belonging to her timetable. I wanted to tell her the first thing being a mother meant for me was protecting a life I'd waited for. Through 7 long months of hope that felt like tiptoeing on glass. But I just said. Softly. There's nothing to pick. She spun on her heel and stalked down the steps. Her boots hitting each one like she was crushing a bug. The echo followed her all the way to the sidewalk. After she left, Ethan swept the torn corners into a cereal bowl because the dustpan was under the sink and I couldn't find words. There was one piece with my name in full. And he slid it under the fridge magnet with the grocery list as if pinning it could keep me from floating away. We're okay, he said. And I nodded because he needed me to nod. I went to work and answered emails that might as well have been in another alphabet. People asked about timelines and deliverables. I typed sentences about budgets and smiled at the right times. At lunch, I stared at my sandwich and thought about Tessa's face when the kitchen went quiet. I thought about the glass sparkling on the counter like a sky that had fallen indoors. My phone buzzed with a group chat ping my cousins sending little heart emojis from the night before, and I wanted to crawl into that moment and zip it up around me. In the afternoon, Mom called. She started with no punctuation. Just words tumbling into each other. You know your sister. She gets these ideas. She's dramatic. She doesn't think. Mom. I said. She booked appointments in my name. Silence crackled on the line. Then. She shouldn't have. I'll talk to her. But you have to understand how hard this is for her. The old script again. The world rearranging itself around Tessa's storm. It's hard for me too. I said. My voice came out flat. Like paper backing on a sticker. I know. Baby. But Tessa imagined being first. She's always imagined that. Mom exhaled. You have everything lined up. A good job. A nice apartment. Ethan. She just needs a little time. I stared at the one plant on my desk. That refuses to die. It's a pothos in a chipped green pot I bought for $3 at a yard sale. It grows new leaves just to prove a point. Time doesn't change due dates. I said quietly. That night, I folded laundry on the bed and watched the news with the volume low, so I could hear if the door knocked again. The apartment smelled like lemon detergent and the faint metallic tang of the morning scare. As if the paper cuts in the air hadn't healed. Ethan practiced saying Dad under his breath when he thought I couldn't hear. Each time he tried, he smiled like it surprised him. I kept replaying the part where everyone cheered for us. The way my aunt's bangles clinked when she clapped. The way my cousin Leo actually wiped his eyes with his sleeve. It hadn't been in my head. It happened. For a few perfect minutes. There was no hierarchy. No measuring tape. No countdown. Just family. Then the room crystallized around Tessa's first place. Last place. Mina. Yours. People like to say you can't see a fault line until the earth moves. That isn't true. The line is always there if you've been told not to step on it your whole life. We grew up tiptoeing. Let her go first. Don't upset her. We'll celebrate you later. By the time you're old enough to choose your steps. You've learned to walk the long way around. I went to bed early and dreamt about sweeping glass that kept turning into mirrors. Each fragment catching my face at a different angle. In one, I looked like my mother, tired but soft. In another, like the older version of Tessa I sometimes imagine when she's quiet. When the engine of her need runs out of fuel. In the last, I was a shape with no features. Holding something small against my chest that made a sound like a heartbeat amplified. I woke to the radiator ticking and Ethan's arm heavy across my waist. Outside. A bus sighed at the corner and moved on. Morning came. And with it the ridiculous normalcy of coffee and emails and a calendar reminder to call the insurance company. I moved through it as if I were on a moving walkway in an airport. Feet going, but ground doing the work. Carried whether I wanted to be or not. I told myself last night was the worst of it. We'd had the explosion. The breaking. The ugly papers. Surely now things would settle into a new shape. I should have known better. Foreshadowing sits quietly in the corner of every family story. Pretending to be a detail you can ignore, a chipped glass. No one throws away. A phrase your mother says without hearing herself. A stack of papers with your name typed too neatly on them. I thought the sharpest edges were behind us. I thought love would weigh more than order. I thought alarms, when they came, they would sound somewhere else. The morning after the papers, I waited for an apology that never came. Not a text. Not a voicemail. Just a silence so loud it pressed against my ribs. By Saturday, Mom called with a tone I know too well, breathless. Decisive. Arranging. We're having a family talk tomorrow. 4 o'clock. My living room. Everyone. Everyone I asked. Though I already knew. 19 people. She said. As if a head count could make it reasonable. We need to calm things down. Ethan mouthed. Don't go. I squeezed his hand and lied with my face. It'll be quick. I baked banana bread because that's what you do when you're raised to show up with something in your hands. I figured butter and sugar could soften edges. We drove across town under a sky, the color of dishwater. The kind of day that can't commit to rain. I told myself this would be a reset. We'd say hard truths in gentle voices. We'd choose the baby over the pecking order. I clung to that picture like a lifeline drawn with a dull pencil. Mom's living room was already full when we arrived, coats piled on the banister. Shoes aligned in hopeful rows. My cousins were perched on the arms of the sofa. Aunt Grace had brought a tray of cut fruit covered in plastic wrap. Every grape in its lane. Dad stood by the window, nodding at no one. It was warm from bodies and the fireplace. Though the fire wasn't lit. And there, by the mantel, stood Tessa. She had positioned herself like a candidate after a pre-interview pep talk, shoulders back. Chin set. Hands clasped loosely as if she had nothing to hide. On the brick ledge beside her, a laptop sat open. The TV was connected. Frozen on a deep blue title slide, "How My Sister Is Ruining My Life." In the bottom corner, the words, "A presentation by Tessa Tran," were typed in small, confident font. A remote rested next to a water glass and a stack of index cards. I stopped in the doorway. The banana bread tilting on its plate. "Is this a joke?" I heard myself ask. But it came out thin. Like a whisper that got lost on the way. Tessa didn't answer. She clicked the remote and the slide advanced to an agenda screen with bullet points. 1. The problem. 2. The impact. 3. The solution. 4. The ask. "Thank you for coming," she began. That clipped voice she uses at work when she wants customers to believe her. "I know tensions are high. My goal today is clarity." Someone coughed into a sleeve. Ethan's jaw went so still, I could hear the small click when he swallowed. Mom stood next to the TV clutching a coaster like a talisman. Dad stared at the edge of the rug. Tessa clicked again. The next slide showed a photo of me at the kitchen table from 2 nights ago. Laughing. My hand on my stomach. I didn't know who took it. The caption read, "You unfair timing. Ever since we were kids," she said. "There's been an understanding in this family about order. I'm younger. But some milestones, important ones, were going to be mine first." She flipped to a slide of 2 bars. One was labeled Tessa. The other Maya. The bars were different heights for no reason I could decipher. Becoming a mother has always been my dream. I have plans. Vision boards. I've done the research. And then Maya, she paused to let the name float, announced she's pregnant. Aunt Grace shifted. "Tess. Please don't interrupt." "This is it." Smiling without her eyes. "This is difficult enough." She moved to a slide titled Impact with subpoints: emotional, social, financial. Under emotional, bullet points read, feeling replaced, grief, anxiety. Under social, loss of narrative, judgment from peers. Under financial, limited resources redirected. She talked for 30 minutes like that, steady, rehearsed, fervent. She mentioned the wedding envelope and said Mom had invested unevenly. She described how her friends would see my posts first. How people would assume she was behind. She explained, with a graph that made no sense, that the optimal grandchild order for family cohesion was to have the youngest child present the first grandchild. She talked about name collisions, holiday schedules, and the pressure of hand-me-downs. "I want to be very clear," she said, finger on the remote poised like a pointer. "This is not about envy. It's about sequence. A sequence that protects relationships. Protects who," Leo muttered from the arm of the couch. Tessa pretended not to hear. "The solution," she announced. And the next slide appeared with 3 options typed in teal. 1. Postpone. 2. Pause. 3. Consider alternatives. Beneath each were dates. Windows. And what I swear were cost estimates. "I already did the legwork for appointments," she added, looking at me. "The front desk knows your name. I can call back." Ethan leaned forward. Elbows on his knees. The posture of someone who has switched from listening to staying. "No," he said. Clear as a bell in winter air. Tessa's gaze slid over him like he was a decorative plant. "This is about sisters," she said. "Men can support. Of course. But..." A new voice cut through. Tired and cool. "Tessa. Uncle Owen, Mom's older brother. The one who does estate law and shows up to birthdays with dry jokes and envelopes," set his coffee down with the deliberateness of someone building a case. "There is no order. There is no sequence. There is certainly no legal standing for what you're proposing." He tipped his head toward the TV. "You're making a show out of something that isn't yours to manage." Tessa's face flickered. For a breath. The veneer slipped, and the heat under it showed. I'm asking for respect. She snapped. You're demanding control. He replied. Over another person's pregnancy. Mom finally stepped forward. Palms out. Let's bring the temperature down. It's already boiling. Leo said. And Aunt Grace touched his sleeve. A warning. Tessa opened her hands to the room like a preacher making an altar call. If Maya doesn't end this, I'm done. With all of you. I can't be part of a family that won't protect me. The room settled into a stillness I recognize from winter storms. That pause before a branch lets go of its ice. For years. This is where our story always bent. Tessa threatened to leave. And the adults rearranged the furniture of our lives to make sure she stayed. You could feel the old instinct twitching in the air, Mom's breath catching. Dad's eyes watering. Cousins straightening, as if they might physically hold her in place. I thought about the sound of paper ripping in our doorway and the way Ethan's hands had trembled just slightly when he said no. I thought about the banana bread, sweating under its plastic wrap on the entry table. I thought about the little heartbeat we'd watched flutter like a moth in a dark yard on the ultrasound screen. I was tired of walking around the fault line. Okay. I said into the quiet. Bye. Tessa. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Leo to me. Bye. Tessa. Then Aunt Grace. Voice thick. Bye. Sweetheart. Uncle Owen nodded once. Bye. One by one. Like a wave breaking in pieces. The room said it. Not cruel. Not triumphant. Just a door closing that had stayed open too long. Tessa stared like she didn't understand the language. She looked at Mom. Then at Dad. Searching for the old choreography. Mom's face folded. Dad took a step and stopped. The silence held. You'll regret this. Tessa whispered finally. Her eyes were bright and hard. And for a second, she looked very young. A little girl lost in a store who decides to knock everything off a shelf. She grabbed the laptop with one hand. The water glass with the other. Set both down with jerks. Then swept the stack of index cards into her bag. The remote clattered to the floor and spun under the coffee table. She didn't pick it up. The front door banged. Then banged again. The room exhaled in fragments. Mom sat down abruptly and pressed her fingers to her temples as if to hold her thoughts in place. Dad rubbed the back of his neck. Someone turned off the TV. And the blue screen blinked away like a dream. The banana bread on the table looked ridiculous. Domestic and warm in a house where a storm had just passed. I collected our coats and found Ethan in the kitchen, washing a plate that wasn't ours. He always does that, finds a small job to make a place feel less broken. He dried his hands and tucked a loose piece of hair behind my ear. You did the right thing. He said. And the relief in his voice made clear he'd been braced for me to do otherwise. We drove home without music. The wipers squeaked now and then at a mist that never committed to rain. I kept thinking of Tessa's agenda slide, the problem. The impact. The solution. The ask. As if a person could be reduced to bullet points and made to fit. As if a heart had tabs you could drag around on a screen until the boxes lined up neatly. The following days were all edges. My phone stayed face down because every buzz felt like the start of a fire. Group chats slowed. Mom texted me a picture of the fireplace with the caption. We'll be okay. But the mantle looked strange without the TV glow. Like a stage after the audience leaves. Dad called and talked about his car's brakes for 7 minutes. Then cleared his throat and said. Proud of you. Quito. And hung up before I could answer. Tessa didn't call. She didn't post. She didn't rage text. It was like she'd stepped out of the family photograph and taken the frame with her. For a while. That quiet felt like safety. No knocks. No presentations. The air in our apartment began to smell like food again instead of nerves. I put the little ultrasound picture on the fridge with the magnet that says, Someone I love lives here. And each time I got water, I touched the corner, as if it were a light switch I needed to flip. But silence can be a lid on a pot. Not a cooling. You don't see what's building until the steam has nowhere left to go. At night, I lay awake and replayed the moment 19 voices told one person no. It was the most loving sound I've ever heard and the most frightening. Loving because it protected something fragile. Frightening because it meant the old bargain was truly broken. A week passed. Then two. At the end of the second. I opened the hall closet to get the vacuum and found the cereal bowl with the torn appointment pages still in it. shoved behind the toolbox, like a bad secret. I carried it to the trash and hesitated. Some part of me wanted to keep one strip with my name. Proof that this wasn't a nightmare I'd invented. I let them go. Paper is just paper until someone gives it power. Ethan came home with a small stuffed fox he pretended was for a friend's kid. He set it on the bookshelf where the light hits in the afternoons and said, "They were out of bears." We didn't talk about Tessa. We talked about paint colors and whether we could squeeze a bassinet next to the radiator if we rearranged the armchair. We talked about work and whether lemon or lavender dish soap makes a place feel more like a home. We talked around the grade of quiet that comes after a storm when you don't trust the sky yet. On a Tuesday, Mom left a voicemail that started with the sound of her sigh. The kind she uses when she's measuring how much of the truth she can carry. "Haven't heard from your sister," she said. "She'll come around." Her voice faltered. "I hope." I wanted to believe it. I wanted to shelve the whole episode, like a book you finished but didn't enjoy and never planned to reread. I wanted normal. But a story doesn't end because the narrator wants a tidy page. It ends when the next chapter insists on being told. Somewhere. I knew. Tessa was writing one without me. I watered the pothos and watched a new leaf unfurl pale. Tight. Then slowly, braver. You learn plants by their habits. People too. My sister's key had a shape I recognized. A curve in the air that meant momentum gathering out of sight. I told myself I was being dramatic. That pregnancy had made me jumpy. That maybe the words, bye. Tessa had finally made space for us all to grow. I should have known better. Silence is not surrender. It's planning. 2 quiet weeks can trick you into believing a story has ended. Mine didn't. It took the shape of a cake knife clattering to tile, and a slogan printed in thick white letters on a navy shirt. My baby shower was supposed to be small friends from work. A few cousins. The older neighbors who have taken to leaving bags of lemons on our stoop. Mom insisted on hosting at a community room she could reserve for free. Which meant a long table. Folding chairs. And a clock that ticked loud enough to organize conversations. We strung paper clouds over the dessert table. Someone blew up too many balloons. Ethan practiced tying bows on tiny boxes and pretended not to be proud of how fast he got. When I walked in, everyone yelled the word you're supposed to yell and then started over because my hands flew to my face before the syllable ended. It was silly and sweet and normal. And I leaned into it like a person who hasn't been able to relax in weeks. I let the room be kind. I cut the cake. I wrote down who gave us which swaddle so I could send thank you notes with specific gratitude. Not just the vague kind that sounds like you're thanking the idea of generosity, rather than the person. The door opened so hard it hit the stopper with a thud that made the balloon arch tremble. Tessa stepped through. Chin up. A smirk balanced on her mouth like a dare. Her shirt did most of the talking first grandchild loading. The progress bar beneath it shaded almost full. Her hands went to her sides so the words would be impossible to miss. A hush slid across the room like a curtain. Mom actually dropped the cake knife. I watched it fall. A silver arc. And bounce once. No one reached for it. Tessa pivoted in a slow circle. Modeling the message. That was when we all saw the curve of her stomach. Round and pronounced in a dress that hugged rather than concealed. The room couldn't decide what to do with its eyes. Happy occasions teach people to clap. A slow, confused patter started up and then died when Tessa laughed. Surprise, she said. I'm almost due. My mouth opened. Then closed. I looked at Ethan. He shook his head once. The tiniest warning. The only thing keeping the floor steady. I forced my voice to be level. My date is 8 weeks out. I said. You. 10. The word snapped like a twig. She let it hang a second. Watched faces do math. And then her smile faltered when I smiled. Relief stupid. Human relief flashed through me. Not because I wanted to be first. Not because any of this had ever been a race in my head. But because there would be space. Space for each baby to be met as itself. Space for the family to stop arguing about sequence and start arguing about who got to hold them longer. For once, it felt like the universe had drawn a clean line that even Tessa couldn't smudge. Color climbed Tessa's neck. She stepped close enough that I could see the tiny cracks at the edge of her lipstick. Close enough that the fabric of her shirt brushed the bow on the gift I was holding. She took my arm. Not with affection, but with possession. And leaned in, so her breath warmed my ear. Doesn't matter. She whispered. I'll make sure mine comes first. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. My skin prickled where her fingers pressed. She let go as if setting down something she didn't value, and walked out on a gust of manufactured triumph. The door swung behind her. The balloons swayed. And the room's heartbeat didn't recover. We tried. We cut slices of cake that no one ate. We took a photo because not taking one would have given her the whole day. In the picture, I am smiling with my mouth and not with my eyes. And Ethan's hand is on my back like he's both steadying me and pushing me forward. When it was finally over, we cleaned up in fast sweeps. I threw away the knife-shaped box someone had used to transport the cake cutter because I couldn't stand the outline of it. 2 days later, Mom called. She didn't start with hello. She started with a sound I had only heard once. The night Dad's mother died of a sudden stroke, a low, broken keening that sounded like she was trying to keep a house from sliding off its foundation. Mom, I said. And my heart started sprinting before my head had permission to run. Tessa. She managed. Then words tumbled so fast I had to sit down. Her roommate called. I didn't know. I didn't know. Maya. She's been trying to make it happen. To make it happen sooner. I pressed the phone to my ear like closeness could fix comprehension. What do you mean? Chemicals. Mom said. Then swallowed. Ordering them online. Things she read on message boards. Teas in amounts that aren't safe. Pills that aren't meant for that. She found someone on Craigslist. A woman who said she'd done procedures before. The last word fell apart in her mouth. At their apartment. My mind balked at the image and then, unhelpfully, provided it anyway, our old coffee table from when Tessa lived with us after college. On a harsh overhead light. A stranger in gloves too big for her hands. No. I said. To the picture or to reality? I wasn't sure. Her neighbor saw Mom stopped. Changed lanes. There was blood under the door. He called 911. By the time they broke in, another stop. Another try. They took her to county. She lost a lot. They had to operate. Emergency. The doctor said the word like it was a door-locking hysterectomy. Maya. She won't. She won't be able to. I could feel Ethan watching me from the kitchen. A dish towel twisted in his hands. I shook my head, and he came. Sat. Covered my knee with his hand as if he could keep my leg from buzzing. The counter behind him still held the little line of gifts we hadn't put away. On the top of the stack. The fox stared at me with its stitched eyes. And the baby, I asked. And the room took a step backward, and another. As if distance might soften the angle of the answer. Alive. Mom said so softly I barely caught it. Alive. But early. Very early. They took him to the NICU. He was breathing then, not then with help. Tubes. He's so small. Her voice cracked. I saw him through the glass. I pressed my hand to it, and it was like touching winter. We got off the phone because there was nothing left to say that words could carry. Ethan called a car, and we rode across town without speaking. The hospital's automatic doors yawned and swallowed us into that strange country where time is measured in monitors and beeps. Down the hall. A security guard gave directions in a voice that made everything sound like a rule. We found Mom in a chair near the NICU. Her hair pulled into a bun, she'd forgotten to check in a mirror. She looked like the picture you take when you don't know you're being photographed, eyes swollen. Mouth brave. Body braced. She folded into me. I let her. Over her shoulder. Through glass. I saw rows of machines. The blue light of numbers moving. The gentle vigilance of nurses, in soft-soled shoes. Tiny hats on tiny heads. A teddy bear sticker on a monitor. I have never wanted to touch so much and been allowed so little. Tessa, I asked into Mom's hair. Recovery. She said. Sedated. When she wakes, they'll tell her what they had to do. She'll hate them for saving her, and hate them for not saving what she thought she wanted more. A nurse in green scrubs approached with the focused kindness of someone who walks between griefs for a living. She explained, in short. Even sentences, what we could see and what we could not. She gently told us we could not go in unless we were on a list. She said the baby was stable now. She said stable is a word that can mean courage, or a pause. She said the room behind her was warm because these little bodies need help remembering. We sat until the ceiling tiles learned our names. Ethan bought coffee that went cold. Mom alternated between silence and small facts about parking rates. As if the price of the garage could anchor the day to a number. I turned my phone over and over like a worry stone. When Tessa woke, She asked for me. The nurse called down from the recovery floor. And I felt something that wasn't obligation, push me to my feet. I went because I am her sister, and because there are only so many times in a life you can be exactly what someone needs, at the precise moment they realize what can't be undone. The room smelled like antiseptic, and the ghost of oranges. Machines hummed. Tessa's face was the color of an unpainted wall. She looked at me. Truly looked. And for the length of one inhale, she wasn't the version of herself that makes the weather. She was just a person in a bed, who had brushed up against the edge of everything. My baby. She said. Her voice thin. He's in the NICU. I said. The nurses are with him. He's fighting. She closed her eyes. A tear slipped without drama. When she opened them again, something had hardened. This is your fault. She whispered. He's dying because you couldn't wait your turn. The sentence dropped between us like a stone, into shallow water splash. Sting. Ripples. I could have said 100 things that the world doesn't run on her schedule. That there were a dozen points at which she could have turned around. That no one took anything from her, she didn't grab for first. But the machines in the room didn't care about our arguments. And the ghost of oranges didn't either. And a nurse walked in with a chart, and the moment broke. I left before I said something that would become a permanent fracture. In the elevator. A man I didn't know stared at the floor numbers like they were voting on his life. The doors opened on the lobby, and the smell of coffee and bleach met me like a tired handshake. By evening, the family group chat had split into private tributaries. One thread filled with prayers and heart emojis and logistics who could bring soup. Who could take mom home to shower. Another. Smaller. Prickled with blame. Words typed fast with thumbs that wanted someone to hold accountable and found me. You know how fragile Tessa can be. One aunt wrote. And though she didn't say it, she meant I should have kept my good news quiet. As if I had thrown a party on a fault line. Maybe. Just maybe. Waiting would have been kinder. Another cousin offered with an apologetic ellipsis. As though kindness were a calendar trick. A message from an aunt I barely speak to arrived like a wasp. Not to be harsh. But you could have made a different choice at the start. The choice hung there. Past tense, pretending to be helpful. I stared at the screen until the words blurred, and I could almost convince myself she meant something else. Ethan took the phone, and set it face down. No more. He said softly. Not tonight. We went home because there was nothing in the hospital we could fix. The apartment felt wrong. Too clean. Like a hotel room with a photograph of us stuck in the frame by mistake. I stood in the doorway of the tiny room we'd started to pretend was a nursery and looked at the stack of picture books on the floor. On top was the one my dad used to read to me about a small rabbit who thinks the moon is following her. I touched the cover and felt like a person, pressing a hand to glass. The next days were made of appointments and updates, and learning the language of a unit I wish no one ever had to learn. Oxygensatz. Apnea. CPAP. Kangaruker. I learned which elevators were faster. Which coffee cart closed early. Which nurse would explain things twice without making you feel like you were asking too much. I learned that the NICU lights dim a little in the afternoon to trick the day into gentleness. Tessa remained a charged cloud. Some hours, she cried so hard the nurse would place a hand on her shoulder to remind her the world still held. Some hours, she stared at the wall and built a case against it. When I went in, she sometimes turned her face away. When I didn't, Mom called to say she'd asked if I even cared. Blame is a magnet for grief. It doesn't matter which way you hold it. It will find metal. At home, I tried to eat. Food tasted like paper with seasoning. I tried to sleep. Sleep tasted like the inside of a train tunnel, noisy and brief. Ethan sat with me in the dark and named constellations I couldn't see. We will carry what's ours. He said. Not what isn't. But lines blur in families. People hand you boxes, with your name written in someone else's handwriting. You hold them out of reflex until your arms shake. I didn't realize until then how thin I'd been stretched. I also didn't realize how quickly a community can shift its gaze. One day, my belly drew hands and laughter. The next, it disappeared in a tide of concern that flowed only one direction. It's like I'm a hallway. I told Ethan. Half laughing, because the alternative was to cry again. People pass through me to get to Tessa. He kissed my temple. You're a person. He said. With a baby. With a husband who is going to insist on ice cream, no matter what you say. We drove for cones in a place that looks like summer, even in winter. Just so we could put something cold and sweet on our tongues while the world burned in a very specific way. At a red light. My phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Later. In the quiet. I pressed play. It was Tessa. Her voice was rasped thin by the hospital air and whatever they'd given her for the pain. You stole my baby's soul, she said. As if souls were coins mixed up in a jar. I will never forgive you. I sat with the message in my palm until it warmed to the temperature of my skin, and then cooled again. Some sentences don't leave your house when you take out the trash. They curl under furniture and wait. This is the part of the story where a narrator is supposed to turn toward redemption. I want to. Truly. I want to say the family rallied around truth and boundaries. But grief doesn't grant epiphanies on a schedule. And people don't untangle patterns because a crisis told them to. The house creaked and settled. The weather changed every hour. And in a ward behind thick glass. A small boy fought to learn how to breathe. Hospitals have their own weather. It's always a little too bright. A little too cold. The air scrubbed until it smells like decisions. By the time I hit 37 weeks. I knew which bench by the elevator caught the afternoon sun. Which vending machine lied about having ginger ale. Which volunteer at the information desk taped smiley stickers to kid sleeves even when the kid scowled. I also knew that every time the NICU doors hissed open. I caught myself looking for Tessa's profile before I remembered I wasn't here for her story, at least not only 2 nights before my due date. I started getting the soft, disorganized tightenings they call practice. Your body rehearsing. The nurse said cheerfully. As if bodies didn't also forget lines under pressure. Ethan packed the bag we'd already packed. He reread the list he'd already memorized: charger, chapstick, a sweater, because hospitals don't believe in summer. We checked in just after midnight. The admissions clerk asked for insurance. Then my ID. Then smiled like she was relieved to see a couple who looked as if they'd studied. I signed in the places they pointed and felt like a person agreeing to the plot. The room they gave us was small, but ours. A window looked out over a blank brick wall that pretended to be a view. I didn't mind. The bed adjusted into angles I didn't know I'd need. A monitor traced the baby's heartbeat in small mountain ranges across the screen: peaks, valleys, peaks. I exhaled when the line climbed as if it had won something. Ethan set the bag down, peeled the sticker off a water bottle, and tried to look useful while a nurse named Clara threaded sensors over my belly with the competence of a pilot fastening a harness. We had 1 quiet hour. Then Clara came back with a crease between her brows. I hadn't met yet. She closed the door behind her. I want to share something so you're not startled, she said. Careful. Earlier today, a woman matching your sister's description was seen asking staff odd questions. Ethan's head snapped up. What kind of questions? Logistics, Clara said. Where newborns are. How long they're ever left unattended. Which doors require badges. Which ones don't. She also asked whether the ankle tags can be removed, and how fast the alarm triggers. Clara glanced at my face. We took it seriously. Security made a note. But I wanted you to hear it from me. My mouth went dry in an instant. Is she here now? Clara shook her head. No. But if you see her or anyone you're not comfortable with, press this. She pointed to a plastic button panel, mounted by the bed. 1 button was blue. 1, red. 1, yellow. Blue is call nurse. Red is emergency. You won't bother us. Bother us. Ethan stood up so fast, his chair skated. I want security at the door, he said. And his voice wasn't loud, but it carried the gravity of a person used to fading until he decides not to. I want our names on a restricted list. No visitors without us saying yes. Even if they cry or say their family. If you have a photo of Tessa, circulate it. Clara didn't flinch. I'll page the night supervisor. 15 minutes later. A woman with a badge that said, Martinez arrived with a folder and a clipboard, and the calm of a lighthouse. She took down Tessa's description. Then asked if we had a picture. Ethan scrolled to a photo from the baby shower. Tessa in that dark shirt. Her chin tilted like defiance. Was a necklace. Officer Martinez studied it. Then clicked her radio, and said a series of numbers that made the room feel smaller and safer at once. We'll put a hold on your chart, she said. No one comes in without your say, so we'll keep an eye on the hall. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until I felt the ache in my ribs. Thank you. The first contraction that wasn't practice arrived like an uninvited guest with keys. It folded me from the inside out. Then left, as if nothing had happened. I gripped the railing. Ethan's hand found mine before I asked. Clara smiled like a coach who has been through more seasons than any team. That's work, she said. Good. We settled into the rhythm that isn't a rhythm surge. Release. Story. Silence. Ethan told me about the time he and his brother tried to build a treehouse, with 2 crooked boards and a dream. I told him about the pathos on my desk. The way its new leaf decided to unfurl the day after Tessa's presentation. As if stubbornness were genetic in plants. 2. Between pain. We named constellations out of ceiling tiles. Between tiles. We closed our eyes. Around 3. A shadow fell across the frosted glass of our door. A shape lingered. Then moved. A minute later. The handle twitched. It didn't turn. Someone had engaged the external lock, but it tried. Small. Testing movements like a person learning a song by ear. Ethan stood. He didn't say anything. He just stood where a person would have to stand if they got in. The handle twitched again. Stopped. And the shadow slid away. Clara buzzed the intercom at the same time that Officer Martinez appeared in the doorway with a second guard whose jacket squeaked when he moved. We're increasing rounds, she said. And the unit clerk is printing a notice for the staff station. A notice. It turned out to be exactly what Ethan wanted but didn't know existed: a page with Tessa's photo and a block of text beneath it: do not grant access, taped on the inside of the glass at the nurse's station. Seeing her face there felt like swallowing ice. Useful and terrible. Necessary. And not what any sister ever imagines. The contractions came closer. I bent over the bed. Then stood. Then sat. Then walked the small length of the room with a loop of IV for company. Between waves. Ethan pressed cold cloths to my neck. Between waves. I loved him with an attention that pushed everything else to the edges. Between waves. Dread snuck back in. At 4:30. The intercom crackled. Security to Labor 5. A voice said. Too calm to belong to the moment. Martinez and the squeaky jacket guard moved past our door in a purposeful blur. Clara slipped in behind them. Stay here, she said. Unnecessarily. Because where else would I go? Later. We learned what happened in those 3 minutes. Tessa had used an old visitor's badge she'd kept from a previous hospital trip. The kind with a barcode that looks official. If you don't know, yesterday's barcodes expire. She'd found a side corridor. She told a unit secretary that she had the right to see me because we're sisters. Because family overrides policy. Because rules shatter when confronted with tears. When the secretary didn't move. Tessa tried volume. When volume didn't work, she tried speed. Slipping toward the double doors, like a person aiming for daylight. Martinez was faster. She caught her at the hip with a firm, practiced hand. You need to leave, she said. Tessa clawed not at the officer, but at the air. Like she could tear a hole in it big enough to walk through. Her voice ricocheted off walls. You can't keep me away. You can't keep me out. She owes me. I'm first. I only heard the end of it. The part where bodies turned direction, and Tessa's shoes scraped as she was escorted toward the elevator. She passed our door then. Held by a storm she'd made. And for half a second her eyes met mine through the window's blur. I couldn't read anything there I wanted to keep. The elevator chimed. The hall exhaled. Afterward. The floor felt different. As if something had burned and left the air cleaner but tender. Clara checked the monitors with the attention of a person counting stars. You're safe, she said. Keep working. Working is what it was. No magic. Just breath and muscle. And time braided together. The hours narrowed. The pain braided too wider at the base. Finer at the top. A rope you can climb if you look only at the next knot. Ethan kept his hand on my back through every climb. When I said I couldn't, he said. You already are. When I said I was scared, he said. Me too. In a way that didn't add weight. Only solidarity. By dawn. The brick wall outside our window was a shade lighter. Not exactly morning. But a promise. Clara checked me. Nodded like a person watching a train arrive exactly when the schedule said it would. Even though no one believed the schedule. It's time, she said. Time is a small word for a door that big. The room filled and organized itself like a team that has run this play before. A pediatric nurse appeared as if conjured. A soft bin labeled, "Warmer" was rolled closer. Someone adjusted the light, so it knew where to look. Clara squeezed my shoulder. "You'll hear a lot of talking. It's all for you." I rode the last miles with my eyes open. I wanted to witness. I wanted. Even in the parts that felt like breaking. To know where the pieces were. Ethan counted with me. Then stopped counting because numbers felt like ladders, and I needed ground. The world funneled to a point. Then widened all at once. A cry split the air, not delicate at all. Not a kitten. Not a bird. More like a protest, from a throat, surprised at its own power. They put her on my chest. Warm and specific. The exact weight of a word you'd been trying to remember all day that lands finally and makes the sentence make sense. She was purple. Then pink. She was slick. Then dry. She was a person, our person with a mouth that already looked stubborn. Ethan made a sound I've heard only once before. The day his father apologized without being prompted. A softened gasp. A yes. Disguised as an exhale. He put his hand on her back. And his fingers looked huge and careful and correct. We cried. The room carried on without noticing, because rooms like that are polite about miracles. A nurse clipped a thin band around our daughter's ankle. A small white tag with a tiny square of red plastic. "Security," she said. And smiled at me like she knew. "If anyone tries to take her past the sensors without you or staff, the whole floor will sing." She lifted the tag to demonstrate. Just enough to test the circuit. And it chirped a bright, bird-like beep that felt like a lock clicking into place on a door I hadn't realized needed one. Ethan laughed. A squeak. Surprised sound that knocked loose the fear I'd been holding behind my ribs for weeks. Clara leaned over us. Name. We'd been careful not to say it out loud in case the world took it as an invitation to meddle. But now she was here. Refusing to be a concept. Refusing to be an order in a line. "Lena," I said. It felt right on my tongue. Light and anchored at once. "Hi. Lena." The hour after a birth is a private kind of weather. Even in a building full of other people's storms. The lights softened. The machines clicked and hummed and then receded to the edges of hearing. Ethan texted our parents 2 words. "She's here," and nothing else. Because sometimes small sentences hold enough. I thought the alarms would be the last sound that mattered. I thought the printed notice at the nurse's station would be the last time my sister's face entered the story of my daughter's first day. I let myself believe. As Lena's fingers uncurled and recurled against my skin. That the worst had passed. That I could finally hold one thing without guarding against another. Outside our door. The hall resumed its careful bustle. Somewhere down the corridor. A printer spat out a page with names and room numbers. Logistics pretending to be a lullaby. I pressed my cheek to Lena's hair and memorized the exact smell of it. Like warm milk. And a new book opened for the first time. The tag at her ankle lay cool against my wrist. A small guardian that didn't know it was a symbol. "Welcome," I whispered. "We've been waiting." By morning. The room had the hush of a chapel after a service. Lena slept with that newborn seriousness. Brow furrowed, like she was reviewing the terms of our family. Ethan dozed in the chair with his mouth half open and one sock missing. A person who had given all his attention away, and forgotten to keep any for himself. I traced the curve of Lena's ear, and told myself I would live inside this hour forever. A knock I didn't recognize pulled the air taut. The woman who stepped in wore a gray cardigan, and a badge that declared her as if that made introductions unnecessary. She had the face of someone who has learned to say hard things like she's ordering coffee. "Good morning," she said. "I'm Alicia from Social Services." Fear spiked old and automatic before my mind caught up. "Is something wrong with Lena?" "No," she said quickly. "Lena is perfect." She sat in the visitor chair and tucked a clipboard against her knees. As if the clipboard might run. "I'm here to talk about your nephew." The word threaded the room and tied our good quiet in a new knot. Ethan straightened. I tucked the blanket around Lena, as if paperwork could bring a draft. "Okay," I said carefully. "As you know," Alicia continued, "your sister is on a psychiatric hold while she recovers. The baby remains in the NICU. We're planning for contingencies." She watched my face with that neutral kindness bureaucracies train into people who need to pass bad news without absorbing it. "If he can't be released to his mother, we look to immediate family. Do you have capacity to take him? Temporary custody? Potentially more." My chest tightened. It would later. 2. When I would try to feed Lena and realize stress steals milk, the way a bad dream steals sleep. I gave birth last night. I said because facts sometimes convince when emotions can't. Alicia nodded. I know the timing is complicated. Ethan leaned forward. Forearms on his thighs. He has a father. He said. A man named Darren. He's been around. Darren has extended family out of state. Alicia said. They've already contacted us. A pause. We try to keep siblings together if there are siblings. There aren't. In this case. We try to place with relatives. You're top of the list. I looked at Lena's face. The gravity of it. The way her breathing made a soft flutter against my wrist. The room with the baby behind the glass slid into my mind. The tubes. The hats. The steady hands. Existed. Specific and fighting. Love is not math. But my brain tried to do math anyway. Number of hours in a day. Number of hands we owned. Number of hearts I could keep fed without feeding them to each other. I wanted to be a person who could hold everything. I wanted to be the kind of sister who says yes, at whatever cost, because yes, has been the currency our family used to buy safety for years. But pregnancy had already rearranged my bones and priorities. My body ached in brand new places. My mind was a set of open windows. Lena was a person today. Not an idea. Alicia waited. She had the patience of someone used to silence doing the work for her. I forced words through my throat. No. I said. It felt like stepping off a curb you didn't see. You can't. We can't. My baby is my only priority right now. Ethan exhaled a relief that made me love him and hate that I needed his relief to fortify my decision. Alicia's face didn't change. But her posture did a small settling. The way paper adjusts when you staple it. Understood. She said. Thank you for being clear. She stood to leave and paused at the door. It's not a forever no. If your situation changes, call the number on this card. In the meantime, we'll pursue placement with the father's family. She hesitated. A human seam peeking through the professional fabric. You are not a bad sister. She said. Then disappeared before I could argue with her, or ask her to repeat it into my future self. When the door clicked shut, the quiet came back different. Ethan pressed his forehead to mine. It's the right call. He said. It's okay to protect what's ours. Protecting one person can look like abandoning another. I held Lena tighter. She fussed. Then settled. The rhythm of her body was the only argument that moved anything in me. I whispered a sentence I didn't know I had. I hope he finds hands that will love him, soft and fierce and strong. By afternoon, the news had spread the way it always does in families unevenly. With additions. My phone lit up with messages that straddled condolence and critique. Proud, you're putting Lena first. Leo texted. And I almost cried from the relief of being understood in a sentence. I would have taken him. One aunt wrote. A knife pretending to be a hug. You know I adore you. But. Another began. And I muted the thread because the word, but is a door you walk through, and realize. Too late. It locks behind you. Mom arrived with a hospital gift shop bouquet that smelled faintly of soap and metal vases. She sat on the edge of the bed, as if the whole structure might tip if she claimed too much space. She looked at Lena for a long time. Then. Very quietly. She's beautiful. The sentence held 100 other sentences, apologies we hadn't learned how to give. Forgiveness. We hadn't practiced. Did they tell you? I asked. About the placement. Mom nodded. Eyes on Lena's nose. Darren's aunt in Idaho. She said. They sound. Kind. They sent a photo of a crib with quilts. She swallowed. Your grandmother used to say quilts are promises you can sleep under. We smiled without looking at each other. Two people from the same origin, trying not to repeat the same mistakes. Then Mom told me Tessa was asking for me again. And my resolve jumped like a deer. Not today. I said. Not for a while. My doctor mentioned a restraining order as I searched for a word that didn't sound like war. Boundary. Mom flinched. She hates paperwork that feels like betrayal. She's not herself. She said helplessly. Then corrected herself. She is herself. That's the problem. I pictured the notice at the nurse's station. Tessa's face under the words, do not grant access. And decided that paper is only a weapon, if you pretend it isn't a shield. We stayed in our room for 2 days that slid in and out of each other like cards. People came in and told us what to check for and what to ignore. And then left with a soft clack of the door like punctuation. Officer Martinez stopped by off-duty just to squeeze Ethan's shoulder and tilt her head toward Lena, with the kind of smile that says some jobs are worth the hard parts. The social worker returned with a folder to sign and an update: the baby would be discharged to Darren's family once he cleared the hurdles the NICU set like tiny finish lines. He'll have a different kind of start, she said. Different isn't always worse. I slept in 10-minute stitches. When Lena cried, I fed her and watched the monitor lights play on the wall. A cheap planetarium that steadied me. Once, in that deep middle of the night, when even the machines in the hall soften, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. I didn't listen. I watched the little ankle tag blink red, and then settle back into stillness, and told myself I would not pull darkness over our nest. We were discharged into cold sun. Ethan clicked Lena's car seat into the base, like he was docking a ship. The outside world felt fraudulent: people buying bread, dogs deciding which patch of grass to consider a thesis, teenagers laughing too loud. Our apartment smelled like its old self: coffee, dust warming on vents, lemon dish soap. The fox on the shelf sat at the angle Ethan had left it. Lena's eyes tracked it for a second as if recognizing a friend from another life. The first week at home was a collage. Ethan boiled water for pasta and then forgot to add pasta. I cried because a sock had a seam in the wrong place. Mom delivered soup and left it on the doorstep like we were a house under quarantine. Then texted, proud of you for resting. The world kept trying to recruit me back to my old self. I declined the invitation politely, by not answering emails, and less politely, by turning my phone face down when it rang. On day 5. A process server knocked at 9 in the morning and handed me papers for a temporary restraining order hearing. I hadn't filed yet. Ethan raised an eyebrow. The top sheet explained that the hospital, not trusting our courage to scale with our fear, had initiated a protective process on our behalf, citing potential risk to a newborn. There was a court date. There were boxes to check for what we requested. Ethan gave me a pen. We checked the boxes. This doesn't mean forever, he said. It means right now. Right now became our strategy. Right now. Sleep. Right now. Hold. Right now. Say yes to help, and no to explanations. Right now. Accept that knowing where your sister is at all times is not your job. The second week brought small miracles I didn't post about because a part of me had learned to keep joy quiet to keep it whole. Lena tracked the black and white pattern on the living room rug for 2 full minutes. The pothos shot 2 new leaves as if competing. Ethan learned how to wear her in a sling and still make grilled cheese. I laughed. Real and round. When he burned the first one and blamed the baby, as if she had called the stove and asked it to misbehave. The voicemail waited like a bad weather system parked off the coast. On a Tuesday afternoon, while Lena slept in a sunspot and Ethan dozed with a book on his chest, I pressed play. Tessa's voice was breathy, thin, charged with a kind of righteousness that makes facts look like suggestions. You stole my baby Sewell, she said. I will never forgive you. My thumb hovered over delete, then stopped. I saved it not as a keepsake, not to punish myself, but because sometimes you need a record of the moment you stopped letting someone rewrite your story in your own house. I forwarded the audio to a folder labeled Boundaries with a calm I didn't feel. I handed the phone to Ethan. He put it in a drawer. A week later, we learned the baby had been transported to Idaho. To a warm house, with quilts, and a woman who texted Mom, a photo of tiny fingers curled around a grandfather's thumb. I stared at the picture until the pixels softened. I whispered, grow, to a child who would not hear me. Because sometimes saying a thing into the air is all you can do to make it true. The hearing came. The judge was a man with smile lines that didn't get used that day. We told the story as if it were a legal problem, and not a family one knocks. Papers. Presentations. Chemicals. Attempted entry. We did not say the part about children being moons we thought were ours. The hospital's report sat on the table, full of acronyms that translated to our fear. The judge signed orders that drew a circle around us and told Tessa, with the power of a stamp, to stay outside it. I signed, too. And my name did not shake. People will tell you that choosing yourself is selfish. Sometimes it is. Often. It's an oxygen mask on a plane. That's skidding there. I went home and breathed. I pressed my face to the top of Lena's head and let the smell of her rearrange every room in my mind. I wrote a list on a sticky note titled Things I Can Control and stuck it to the fridge. Bottles washed. Mail sorted. Laugh when possible. Cry when necessary. Keep the fox on the shelf where the afternoon light hits. Text Leo back. Drink water. Love Ethan out loud. Love Lena more loudly. The family didn't split so much as settle into new continents. Some relatives drifted toward Tessa, constructing rafts out of old stories where she is the weather and we are umbrellas. Others set down stakes near us. Mom straddled the water, building a bridge plank by plank in hope that one day we could walk to each other without getting wet. I don't know if we will. That not knowing sits on a chair in the corner and behaves itself most days. One night, 3 months in, Ethan and I took Lena to the park at dusk. The sky was purple in the extravagant way skies can afford when they know you'll be impressed no matter what. A little girl on a scooter announced to no one, "I'm being brave." I laughed out loud, surprised by the sound of it. On the way home, my phone buzzed with a number I knew. I let it go to voicemail. The urge to pick up is strong when the person on the other end taught you that love is answering at all hours. Lena hiccuped. A miniature thunderclap. The fox bobbed in the stroller basket. The city smelled like warm bread and rain about to happen. At home, I didn't press play. Not that night. Maybe not for a while. Not every chapter needs to be read in order to be true. Some you put on a high shelf and let the dust do its gentle work. This is not the story where everyone learns the same lesson at the same speed. It's the story where a woman drew a circle, stepped inside with her husband and her daughter, and learned to lock the door. The ankle tag chirped in my memory. Bright and insistent. I realized it wasn't just a device. It was a practice. When someone tries to carry you past a boundary, your life should sing. People ask me softly if I regret saying no. Here is what I can say yesterday. Lena laughed a real, from the belly laugh at the sound of a measuring cup dropping on the floor. I laughed too. And for a second, the room echoed with a harmony we hadn't known how to make. Regret has no room in a place that small, and that full. I hope my nephew grows into a house with quilts and sidewalks safe enough for scooters. I hope Tessa finds the ground where her weather calms. I hope my mother sits between her daughters one day and talks about lemon bars and recipes instead of terms like order and blame. I hope. I hope. I hope. And tonight, when I put Lena to bed, I will touch the fox's stitched ear for luck, smooth the corner of the quilt, and whisper, the only promise I know I can keep. I choose peace, not permission. I choose us.